Starting off, guys, the worst evolution in the game is the Evolved Goblin Drill, and it's actually the only one going into F tier because I just think it is significantly worse than every other evolution in the game, which is why everyone running the Goblin Drill prefers running the regular version with two other evolutions in their deck. Like maybe they want to run the Evolved Tesla, for example, and the Evolved Snowball because the Evo Drill just sucks and almost never gets more value than the regular version, and it's been that way ever since they removed the death damage it gets when it respawns. We're going to start off D tier, guys, with the Evolved Bomber. This card has fallen off so much recently. In fact, Goblin Drill players don't even really play it anymore. The only time you'll occasionally see it is maybe inside of a Lava deck here and there, Golem, but even those heavier decks prefer other evolutions, and ever since they increased it to 2 cycles instead of 1, it has just been a lot worse, and also it doesn't get that double bounce anymore on top of the same unit. And that same thing also applies, surprisingly, guys, to the Evolved Dark Goblin. The Evolved Dark Goblin got so much worse ever since they nerfed it, because now essentially that gas it gets, that cloud, that poison cloud that lasts for a long time, does not last that long any longer. It doesn't just last for ages. It expires so much quicker, so now it's not nearly as good against beatdown pushes, and bait players don't tend to run it much anymore. So kind of crazy how one balance change is all it takes for an Evo to go from one of the best to one of the worst. The Evolved Barbarians are going to be next. They're okay. They're going to be okay inside of maybe a Lava Hound deck or a Bridge Spam deck, but there's usually going to be better alternatives. Now that we have things actually like the Evolved Lumberjack in the game, a lot of Bridge Spam players prefer running that as one of the Evos instead of the Evo Barbs because it just tends to provide more value in a lot of circumstances. And the problem is, if you run the Evo Barbs, you're going to have to run the regular Barbarians, use that standard version, which is horrendous, in order to play the evolution. The Evolved Hunter, guys, got a lot worse ever since they removed the perma-stun away. Now he can't just like net something forever. That unit actually has a chance once the net ends up expiring to kill him or get some value. So ever since that perma net aspect has been removed, he has been a lot worse. And actually a lot of RG decks now are using the Evolved Wizard over the Evolved Hunter because of the current meta. That's assuming the Spirit Empress, the Furnace, and the minions still remain to be pretty good even after they get nerfed. The Hunter has definitely fallen off quite a lot. The Evolved Mega Knight is also not in the best spot at the moment. I think part of the reason is because with things like P.E.K.K.A, Evo Gob Giant being in a pretty good spot, that Chef deck, that's going to be a pretty good counter to the Mega Knight. Also, a lot of Prince running rampant. Also, Boss Bandit, which tends to counter him pretty well. And even though he does get more value than the standard Mega Knight, he definitely has seen better days than we've seen currently, and Mega Knight Ram Rider is just not in a good spot either in the meta. You pretty much can only run him with the wall breakers. The Evolved Witch, guys, has really fallen off quite a lot ever since they gave her a nerf. She's so much worse inside of graveyard decks now, and she doesn't end up being that great inside of other things. So even though she was nerfed, the times you do see her tend to be with graveyard, unless you see her in some crazy off meta deck, which you might do on mid ladder. But the bottom line is, she's a lot worse, and she doesn't stay alive infinitely anymore inside of graveyard decks, which some might argue is a good thing, but she's definitely one of the worst Evos now, without a doubt. The Evolved Wizard, guys, definitely a pretty bad evolution, but this last month, he has proven to be somewhat viable, especially inside of Royal Giant decks, because he's just getting more value than the Evolved Hunter recently, ever since the Evolved Hunter got nerfed, and he tends to counter a lot of the meta cards. We don't know how it's going to be this meta after the balance changes are now live, but if it ends up being the same case, I would say he's in D tier and no longer F. Certainly way better than the Evolved Goblin Drill, that's for sure. The Evolved E-Drag, guys, not an amazing evolution, but with Golem being in an okay spot recently, especially Golem Chef, and I feel like the Furnace has been a nice Evo combination with the E-Drag. I've been seeing that inside of Golem decks, or maybe Evo E-Drag with the Evo Lumberjack. It's definitely viable, and someone actually finished top 10 in the world last season with the E-Drag, something that we have not seen in a very, very long time. So you definitely can use it inside of Golem, but not really Lumberloon Freeze anymore. We're going to start off C tier, guys, with the Evolved Firecracker. Of course, I know mid-ladder players, many of them still probably really hate her, even though she did end up getting nerfed, but we can't deny the fact that she is significantly worse now that her knockback was reduced. It's so much easier to hit your spells on top of her, and also she just doesn't stay on the other side of the map nearly as long without having that as big of a knockback, which definitely makes her, I would say, a below average evolution at that point. And you pretty much only see her inside of Hog decks now. The Evolved Goblin Cage is going to be alright, especially inside of Recruit decks, or maybe if you want to use it inside of a Graveyard deck. The biggest drawback of it, though, is, of course, it's very inconsistent. It's not going to be good at all against Cycle decks, and, of course, against Air decks. If you're against a Lava Hound deck or a Balloon deck, it's pretty much just going to be the regular Cage at that point. But if you're playing against something like Golem or an Evo Gob Giant, then it's going to be very valuable. So it's very matchup dependent, and I think an Evo like this can never be one of the best in the game because it relies so much on what you're playing against. Evolved Lumberjack is going to be next. I feel like it's okay, especially inside of Bridge Spam decks and inside of Golem, but it's kind of the type of thing where you can use it if you want, but it's certainly not a requirement, and there's a lot of substitutes someone might want to run instead. But I think decks where you can utilize that rage aspect of it, it's going to be pretty valuable. So that's going to be Golem when there's a ton of heavy units clumped together. It's going to be nice, or Bridge Spam decks, of course, but you can't really use it in Cycle decks, which is probably the biggest drawback of it. Evolved Battle Ram is going to be next. I feel like it's okay. What's interesting is a lot of people running this evolution aren't even running it with the P.E.K.K.A. or the Mega Knight. They're often using it maybe with the Evolved Lumberjack, for example, and they're using it with the Golden Knight and some other Bridge Spam cards. But I think because there's a lot of stuns in the game and a lot of buildings at the moment, it kind of helps keep the Evo Battle Ram in check, and there's just definitely more consistent win conditions, which is why I don't think it's the absolute greatest. The Evo Ice Spirit guys took quite a hit ever since they nerfed the Ice Spirit. It actually impacted the Evo Ice Spirit way more than the regular Ice Spirit because it technically is getting 2 nerfs since it's freezing things twice, whereas the regular Ice Spirit, it's only once. So now you have a ton of people using the regular Ice Spirit over the evolution, and the evolution definitely does not get nearly as much value. So I would actually say it's a below average evolution now after that nerf. That's really all it took to go all the way from one of the best to below average. But to be fair, I do think it's pretty impactful when it's freezing things less and it happens twice instead of once for the regular Ice Spirit. The Evolved Musketeer, guys, is going to be really good inside of Loon Cycle and also Giant Graveyard. She's going to be great for sniping things, like maybe you can snipe like a cannon or a bomb tower, which is why it's great inside a Loon to help you get your Loon to the tower. Giant Graveyard, it can be good as well, maybe if you're sniping a high DPS card that someone played on your Giant, but it can be blocked, so if you are smart and you know when they have that in Cycle, you go Skeletons or something like an Ice Golem and protect your unit. So that's why it's not completely broken. There are ways to counter it. It also really depends on the matchup, because there's some matchups, if you're against a Beatdown deck, for example, it's not really going to be doing anything, so it kind of depends on what you're facing. Evo Skeletons, guys, are, I would say, top of C tier here. The regular Skeletons are actually used significantly more than the evolution ever since they made it, well, so there's 3 instead of 4. You can't do the 2 in one lane, 2 in the other. That 2-2 split was really, really OP in a lot of scenarios, and now you find them not multiplying nearly as often, and I feel like they're just overall pretty balanced evolution. You can use them if you want in Loon Cycle, for example, but once again, a lot of decks, especially Royal Giant, for example, and some other Cycle decks like maybe Drill, you often just see the regular Skeletons now instead of the evolution. We're going to start off B tier, guys, with the Evolved Bats. They actually usually are higher than this. Typically, they're A, or even sometimes I would have them in S tier, but recently in this current meta, if it still stands, then I still think this is going to be the case. They haven't been as good ever since the minions ended up getting buffed, because minions have proven to be a way better replacement and just better in most scenarios ever since they got that range buff, and they're very vulnerable to the Zap, especially the Zap evolution, which so many people are playing, which I think really kind of keeps the Bats not in a very good spot at the moment, but you can use them inside a Mortar if you want to, and they're good for baiting out spells. Speaking of the Mortar, it's going to be going in B tier. It was actually suffering for a very long time. I remember I kept putting it in D tier, but I think it's actually back up. It has risen now to B tier because I think with some of the recent evolutions in the game, like the Evolved Skeleton Barrel especially, that has definitely revived Mortar. And even the Evo Furnace, definitely not a bad combination with the Evo Mortar, and we can't deny the fact it's so much better than the regular Mortar, which is pretty bad, pretty weak in comparison. You're not getting that Goblin, and it's not shooting as often. Evo Mortar is definitely solid, and you have that defensive aspect as well, so you're not even using it on offense. Defense, it can be really good for defending pushes. Evo Recruits, guys, are going to be going in B tier. I know they're very annoying, but they're not as broken as people think they are. I think them being very expensive makes them kind of a risky card to use, but they can be pretty good with the Royal Hogs. I don't see as much recruits bait anymore because bait hasn't been in the most amazing of spots recently, especially because of a lot of the spells like the Goblin Curse and Barbarrow Log, a ton of people using. And I think a lot of the defensive decks tend to be pretty decent against recruits, but they can be very annoying, especially in single elixir if someone cycles recruits and you're getting that evolution down that's charging. So it's kind of matchup dependent. And the Evolved Goblin Barrel, guys, it was an A tier, S tier for the longest time, but it's actually pretty balanced now, especially because of this meta. I was just talking about why recruit bait is not in the best spot. It's the same for bait in general. Everyone running the Goblin Barrel, though, you have to run that evolution. But the Evo Barrel, I really don't think is all that, especially because somehow, someway, there's even still some people using towers like the Dagger Duchess, even after all the nerfs she ended up getting. But not only that, I just think a lot of decks nowadays just have double or triple small spell even, especially inside of those Goblin Machine, Gob Giant spam decks, and that's really difficult for bait to beat sometimes, but I do think it's still kind of an average evolution, and if you're a bait enthusiast, you can still have a lot of success with it. The Evo P.E.K.K.A, guys, is going to be next. I feel like it's not as good as the Gob Giant, for example. Even though you see the Gob Giant and the Evo P.E.K.K.A together in that deck, the P.E.K.K.A, you're almost always seeing it with the Gob Giant. I feel like Evo P.E.K.K.A, you don't see it too much anymore, especially with the Ram Rider. That's almost never seen. If you ever see the Evo P.E.K.K.A in a deck where it's kind of used in and of itself without the Gob Giant, it would maybe be with the Evo Battle Ram. But I feel like that's not as common in this meta, and I feel like it's an evolution that really requires the right cards with it, if that makes sense, like the Evo Gob Giant. And in and of itself, I think it's pretty balanced, so I think B tier is a good spot for it. Ever since, guys, the Archers ended up getting reworked, where the standard version was buffed and the Evo was nerfed, I would say they're now in B tier instead of A or S tier. It's definitely helped balance them out a little bit. They're going to be very good inside of Expo still, but I don't see them as often inside of Giant Graveyard, so it's pretty much only one deck where they're going to be pretty solid in, but I think they in and of themselves is what make Expo pretty decent because their evolution is still good for what it is, even after the nerf. The Evo RG, I'm going to put kind of at the top of B tier here. I think that you have to use the evolution in order to use the standard version, but I think even the evolution, even though it's better than the standard version with that knockback, it's knocking back things like a Knight or a Mini P.E.K.K.A, for example, I don't think it's amazing in this current meta because no one really finished super high with it at the end of last season, especially because of Gob Giant spam, Evo Wall Breakers, things like that can be really difficult for RG decks to keep up with, and also if the opponent has a building, the evolution in that scenario isn't getting a lot of value. So I feel like it's overall pretty balanced, and also with the Evo Hunter being a lot worse, I think that that is also keeping the RG from being A tier at the moment, but we'll see if the Evo Hunter ends up being a bit better in this meta or if RG is a bit stronger after the balance changes. The Evo Snowball, guys, is what we're going to be closing out B tier with. It was really broken for a couple months, I remember, for a while, especially with the Goblin Drill, but it has been toned down a little bit recently. I feel like the Evo Snowball Goblin Drill combination hasn't been as prevalent as the meta has shifted. I think the Evo Furnace was honestly a really big part of that, so you also can't really use it inside of Loon Cycle, which kind of means the regular Snowball is going to be better in some scenarios, which kind of, it sounds weird to say, but I feel like that kind of keeps the Evolved version balanced because decks like Giant Graveyard and also Loon Cycle have the regular version, but then the Evo Snowball kind of has its own decks, right? So that would be Goblin Drill, especially, it's going to be very good, or a Ram Rider Bridge Spam deck, the Evo Snowball could be very good as well, but I don't think it's absolutely broken. It really depends on the matchup. The Executioner, guys, we're going to start A tier with it. It's pretty good in the right deck. I feel like it's very good inside of Bridge Spam decks with the Ram Rider. We saw that deck was very good a few months ago. Also, Graveyard Freeze. Graveyard Freeze is the best deck. I would say it pairs well in that defensive potential you have where you're dealing all that extra damage. It's really good against air decks. I think is really solid, but it's not going to be that amazing against Cycle, and I feel like the Evo Furnace kind of made it a little worse too because a lot of the decks that ran the Evo Executioner kind of just subbed in the Furnace. The Evo Skeleton Barrel, guys, kind of fell off a good bit. I would still say it's A tier, but when they nerfed the death damage, it went from basically being the best evolution in the game to not even in the top few, I would say. I would still say it's well above average, but you're definitely seeing it a lot less. I mean, it's still going to be really good inside of Mortar decks, of course, or you can make it work inside of a bait deck. Maybe Recruits if you want, but I don't even see it in Recruits that often. It's mostly been limited to Mortar now, or maybe a Miner deck, but it's not nearly as broken, and maybe the Evo Furnace helped keep it in check as well. Evolved Valkyrie, guys, is going to be next. She's very good, of course, inside of bait decks, but not even only bait, and with bait not being in an amazing spot in this meta, I think you got to pay attention to some of the other decks she's very good in. Lava Hound is, of course, an obvious one for being able to have that defensive potential. So if you go Lava Hound, you have that Evo Valk, which can basically defend everything. And then also Hog X NATO. I don't know what it's been, but Hog X NATO with the Evo Valk, I've seen kind of a return in popularity of that recently, and I think a big part of it is thanks to the Evolved Valkyrie, because it just really does allow you to defend just about anything. And I think she also probably is going to pair pretty decently well with the Baby Dragon evolution, because you often see Valk and Baby Dragon in the same deck sometimes, especially if it's something like a graveyard deck or something along those lines. I could see that combination being pretty good, that NATO and that splash aspect. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how the meta plays out. The Evo Tesla, guys, got so much better ever since they increased the damage it does. It just changed a lot of interactions, and in decks where it's important to have a strong defense, for example, like Goblin Drill or Hog decks, Expo, even Logbait sometimes prefers the Evo Tesla over the Cannon if they want more air defense. It has proven to be very, very solid, and it is now, you know, one of the better evolutions in the game, going from one of the worst to one of the best just after they ended up giving it that pulse damage buff. That's really all it took. Sometimes that's all it takes, is just one balance. The Evo Inferno Drag, guys, last meta, because of all the Furnace, I feel like it was kind of kept in check and it wasn't super crazy, but with the Evo Furnace getting that nerf, I feel like it's going to have a chance to shine again, especially if it's paired with the Evo Baby Dragon. I feel like that could be a really good combination, especially inside of Graveyard Freeze decks or just Graveyard in general. Maybe even Lumberloon Freeze could be revived with the Evo Baby Drag as well. It's a bit of a prediction, and of course only time will tell since the meta just started, but I feel like the Evo Inferno Drag, before the Evo Furnace absolutely dominated the meta, was definitely a well above average Evo. Just kind of absolutely made sure Beatdown wasn't out of control. It's a really good counter to the Evo Gob Giant, of course, which is very strong. And then even against cycle decks, if they don't have any sort of reset or a freeze like an Ice Spirit, they can be really screwed, because if it just locks on your tower for a little bit, you lose your whole tower. Evo Knight, guys, I'd definitely say is better than the Evo Valk. I feel like it kind of serves a similar purpose for one less elixir, and I feel like he just tends to be a little bit more versatile in a lot of decks. I mean, he's going to be very good inside of a lot of different cycle decks, whether it's Logbait, Expo, Hog, but then he's also going to be good inside of heavier decks as well. Of course, Graveyard, he's the evolution of choice oftentimes. Just such a good tank paired with things like the Goblin Hut. Also, the Evo Furnace pairs very well with him in Graveyard, of course. And I just feel like for only 3 elixir, just so much health, good amount of DPS, good stats for the cost, as a lot of people say. Definitely one of the stronger evolutions of the game, but not completely broken. This is a little bit of a prediction, guys, so bear with me if I'm a little bit incorrect, because bounces did just come out. In my opinion, Evo Furnace is still going to be very good. I'm going to have it at the top of A tier. It's not going to be spawning Fire Spirits as often now. They reduced basically the spawn rate of the Fire Spirits for the evolution. I still think it's going to be an above average evolution, though. I think kind of like the Evo Witch, which, as you guys know, when it initially got that first nerf, it wasn't enough, and it was still very broken. I still think the Evo Furnace is going to be a well above average evolution. I predict it's at least going to be A tier, bare minimum at least B, but at the moment, I still think it's going to be a top 10 evolution in the game, because it's extremely versatile. It's so good with Graveyard, Gob Giant, and then inside of minor cycle decks, you can use it as well. Mortar, Golem, it just fits in so many different things, so I don't see the nerf completely killing the card. That's my prediction anyway. The Evo Baby Dragon, guys, this is a little bit of one where it seems like people can't agree on how strong it is, but I think, in my opinion, it's an S tier simply because it's a one-cycle evolution. People, I think, don't realize how good a one-cycle evolution is, how often you can get it down, and when it's paired with the right things, for example, like a Prince, or a Battle Ram, or maybe even the Evo Skeleton Barrel. Imagine that just speeding up. But if you guys have seen clips of the interactions and what it's capable of, it's actually very strong. And a lot of pros think it's very broken. Some of the world finalists think it needs an emergency nerf. So don't say like I'm the only one saying that it's broken. So many pros are saying it's broken too. I know with these new Evos, that's always very controversial because some people get mad at people saying like they're very broken if they get nerfed. But genuinely, guys, because it's a one-cycle evolution, I think that it is very strong. But of course, it's a tiny bit of a prediction, but I can tell you guys right now it's without a doubt an above average evolution. I'm 100% sure, but I think it's probably top 5. Some pros think it's the best Evo in the game, or like top 3. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's very, very good, and only time will tell. The Evo Gob Giant, guys, I'm going to say is top 4. It finished number 1 in the world last season for a reason. It's been very strong recently with the Chef, and also the other broken cards with it, like the Gob Curse. Gob Curse did get nerfed, though, so maybe it's going to be toned down a bit. But because it finished number 1 in the world last season in that Goblin Machine Gob Curse Prince deck, I'm going to have to put it in the top 4 just because of that. It's been super oppressive if you don't have the right counters to it. It also compared very well with the Evo P.E.K.K.A, but some people are using Gob Giant decks without the Evo P.E.K.K.A, like the deck that finished number 1 last season. So that's why I think it's significantly better than the evolved P.E.K.K.A. Just spawning those goblins, it's super obnoxious for people to deal with, especially if it's getting leveled up to level 16 from the Chef. It's absolutely nuts, as I'm sure you guys know. Wall Breakers are top 3. They're very good. As you guys know, I've thought they've been very good for a long time. I don't think they're the best evolution in the game anymore, but I would still say they're just super consistent. Minor Wall Breakers have just proven to be so good, and pretty much the only evolution Mega Knight decks you see nowadays are with the Evo Wall Breakers. They're very good with the recruits as well. Just deal so much damage for only 2 elixir. The best Wall Breaker deck, of course, though, is Minor Poison Wall Breakers, I think, without a doubt. You can use them with the Drill as well. I just think you can't really go wrong with them, and they're just a very consistent way of getting damage. Even if your opponent has a building, you can easily outcycle it because they only cost 2 elixir. The Evo Zap, guys, in my opinion, second best evolution in the game. I think it's actually part of the reason why we've seen Beatdown in such a good spot recently. It just pairs so well inside of Beatdown decks, whether it's with the Evo Goblin Giant, for example, or maybe someone wants to use it with the Evo P.E.K.K.A. Lava Hound. It's pretty much always a must-have, right? You might see it inside of a Giant deck, Elixir Golem deck. It's very versatile among the Beatdown decks. You can run them basically, run it in any side, because I'm having trouble speaking, my apologies. You can pretty much run it inside of any Beatdown deck you want, and it's going to be a consistent way of not just resetting things, like maybe an Inferno Tower or Inferno Drag, but also for taking things out. It's going to be really good at killing things like Evo Archers, Evo Firecracker. It's probably the reason why those 2 evolutions aren't better than they are, because of things like the Evo Zap. Really good interactions with it. And lastly, guys, in my opinion, the Evo Cannon, best evolution in the game. I know they nerfed the radius of basically the barrage of bombs that drop, but it has still proven to be, I would say, the best evolution in the game because it's just so versatile across the board, whether it's all the cycle decks, basically. You think of Log Bait, you think of Hog, Royal Hog Cycle, Goblin Drill. All these cycle decks, right, tend to run the Evo Cannon as their evolution of choice. Definitely more common and popular, and I would say stronger than the Evo Tesla. And not even just inside of cycle decks, of course. We can't deny how good it is inside of control decks. A lot of graveyard players still like running the Evo Cannon. You could even use it inside of something like E-Giant. The people that still run E-Giant nowadays tend to have the Evo Cannon over things like the Evo Cage, just because it provides a lot more value consistently, I think, for being 1 less elixir. And when it's double and triple elixir and there's so much stuff going on in the map, just going in for that Evo Cannon, sometimes you can just get like 10 elixir worth of value. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe. You can use creator code BOSS to support me in any Supercell game. Let me know in the comments below what you guys agree and disagree with. Thanks again. Until next time, guys.